having us. It's an honor to be here. I really want to give gratitude to all the staff of Tia Chucha's and to Trini Rodriguez and Louis Rodriguez for being the connection for me with this place. It's a deep honor to be here. And I also want to give gratitude and acknowledgement to the Fernandino band of the Tatavian people who have been in this beautiful valley, stewarded this beautiful valley for generations immemorial, and recognizing that they're still here, preserving, protecting, restoring these lands. And for me, really wanting to, just really honor and dedicate this talk, this presentation from us tonight for their efforts to continue to preserve and protect their homeland and reclaim their rights in their homeland, and for all indigenous people as the original stewards of the lands that we are all lucky enough to live on. So without further ado, I want to turn it to Ramiro to welcome us another layer deeper.
Lots of kamati, Mateo. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Darcy, lots of kamati for allowing me to share this space with you. Lots of kamati to the staff and for holding the space and making sure that everything's gonna go good tonight. And thank you all for coming and everyone who's online. I'm gonna open it up with a song. It's a gratitude song, it's a prayer song. It's a song that will allow our ancestors to come in and just take our prayers, our intentions, wherever they need to be, but also just to give gratitude for, for being here and for the role that they played for us, and then just also gratitude for all of us just being here together with one another. Ha hey ana to ta sing to na sing en wika en la tipa shinishka ke ana hene shinishka ke panemwani shinishka ke panemwani en el wika en la tipa la tsoka mate ana hene oe en ente yo en ente yo en el wika en la tipa shinishka ke ana hene shinishka ke panemwani shinishka ke panemwani en el wika en la tipa la tsoka mate ana hene oe hae ana to tatsin to natsin en el wika en la tipa shinishka ke ana hene shinishka ke panemwani shinishka ke panemwani en el wika en la tipa la tsoka mate ana hene oe en ente yo en el wika en la tipa shinishka ke ana hene shinishka ke panemwani shinishka ke panemwani en el wika en la tipa la tsoka mate ana hene oe. Oh, Mateo. Tsoka mate.
So I really want to thank you all for being here, folks that are here with us in person and also those that are tuning in. And maybe just to share a little bit of the arc of our time to begin. So Ramiro and I will each share a little bit more about who we are and where we came from and how we came to be sitting here tonight in this conversation. And then I'll share a little bit more about this book that's here. It's odd to sit here next to it, but here's the book, and I'll offer a little bit of a reading from it in addition to just sharing a little bit about how it came to be and what it is. And then Ramiro will share a little bit more about his work and offer us a couple of poems. And so honored and excited. I got to hear a little bit of his poetry earlier today. So that feels really special to be up here with him. And then we'll open it up for some questions and discussion for the next little while. And that'll be our evening. So just to share a little bit more about me. So my name is Darcy Jane Ottey. I come from the lands of the Puyallup people, known in the lands now known as Tacoma, Washington. And I live now on the east side of the Cascades in Washington in the lands of the Methow people, tucked up against the Canadian border. And rites of passage have been part of my life since I was 13, really significant coming of age experience in the wilderness that I was lucky enough to have at age 13. As a young white girl from Seattle, that experience met a really deep hunger in me that hadn't been fulfilled before that in my life. And then as I grew older, I came to really understand like how significant that experience was for me, and also how complex it was for me. It was very much grounded in indigenous teachings and practices that were not from my ancestry. And I really came to understand like, wow, like that, there's some huge problems with that. And what actually are the teachings of my people and my ancestors? And what are the rites of passage that are culturally appropriate and culturally relevant given where I come from and who my people are? And one of the gifts as I was like kind of deeply following that and also offering rites of passage to other young people was to come be in contact with a broad community that's sort of centered under the name of youth passageways. And that's how I first connected with Tia Chuchas and Louis and Trini and Ramiro, and I'll also name Myra Zaragoza, and the young warriors of Tia Chuchas was through that work with youth passageways, really bringing together practitioners and cultural workers and organizers and authors, a wide variety of people that were all really passionate about what is it to support young people into mature adulthood in these times in different ways in our communities. Really coming together to learn from each other and to reckon with the histories of oppression in our different lineages and what it is to be oppressor and oppressed in one body and oppressor and oppressed sitting together, and really trying to bring healing and trying to bring ceremony in ways that serve us all. So yeah, the two kind of main emphases of my work right now are really around what does it look like to reclaim and regenerate ancestrally rooted cultural practices amongst white and white assimilated people, and what does it look like to really de-assimilate from whiteness and to take off that weapon and that privilege and actually show up in multicultural movements for solidarity, and then to do that work of coming together across difference. Yeah, and I'll just name that Ramiro and I first met in 2016. We've been talking the past couple days in a bumpy moment of cross-cultural conflict, not too far from here, at a gathering of youth passageways. And we've since, really connected over the years especially I would say this fall when Ramiro and I were at a gathering together, and just really feeling your heart and your care for the young people. And also, I would say there's something for me that's very special as a young person who's, who my mom kind of made great efforts to give me, to like instill in me the values of care for the community and love of nature, and was really through her that I first connected with Rites of Passage. So I feel like there's also some affinity with just like being a kind of next gen, getting older person in this work in some way. So yeah, thank you for sitting with me tonight. It's a total honor. And would love it if you'd share a little more.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so again, thank you all for being here. For me, rites of passage, my rites of passage was kind of tumultuous. It came in my life the way I grew up, from about being born in East LA, through living in Chicago and the rough neighborhoods that I was in, through gangs, prison, drugs, alcohol, all the things that I went through. Those were my rites of passage. That's how I looked at it. At that time, I didn't really have an understanding of who I was as an indigenous person until I was much older, until I went to prison. When I was in prison, had my father and elders and teachers sending me stuff. I had, when I came out, I have elders and teachers. I had one of them here, Picos. Glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And since I've been out prison, who have helped me understand the importance of my life, the self-worth that I didn't have, now I have it, and that rites of passage that happens in our lives, it's happening now for me as an adult. And I'm going through those stages years. It's not just, when she talks about the book, you'll see it, there's stages, right? But for me, those stages come in bundles of years. Each bundle of years as I go through my own life, because I missed out on a lot. As a young person, I missed out through my 20s from all the prison time I did, so I'm just going through all of this now, but it's an awakening for me, and it's beautiful, I've made stronger connections with community. I made stronger connections with my kids. With my grandkids, I didn't have all of those connections. I sometimes feel isolated. I feel like, but I do that to myself. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to deal with people sometimes. I always say, if I can get all of my financial burdens out of the way, I want to go live out in the mountains and just escape from everyone, But I'm learning now how it is the connectivity that's needed for all of us, And then I'm also understanding I have to acknowledge the hurt that I've done in my community, the pain that I caused, the things that I have did, what I left behind, that wake of chaos when I went to prison, There's a lot of young people that were hurt, my family too, my siblings, my kids, Fortunately, my daughter, she just got out of prison herself in March, so I have to deal with those facts. She's following in her dad's footsteps, I never wanted that for my own kid, So what I'm learning, so I would like for her to understand what a rite passage is all about, how she can maneuver through all of those things and get into that next transition of her own life, especially for her two daughters who she gave me, I got two grandkids from her, and so that's very important for me, and so, yeah, that's pretty much my road and where I'm at and how I'm sitting here today. Youth Passageways, since they're a great organization. They've my connections with them, like Darcy said, it didn't start good, but I think a lot of it just comes from me too. I'm gonna be honest. Dealing with white people has not always been easy to deal with. Growing up in Chicago, The gangs there were white supremacist gangs. The cops come at us, white supremacists. See, I had to deal with a lot of that, and so it hasn't always been an easy road learning how to just get along with people. That's basically it, just getting along. It took me a long time to understand how to do that, and understand that we're all trying to be here together to save our youth, our young people, and even to this day, I mean, we know what's happening out there, there's the guns, the drugs, fentanyl, it's rampant. It's hitting all our communities, whether it's here or in Chicago, all over the country, and how are we going to be able to stick together to help stop all of that, And we don't want to. We're losing generations of our kids, our young people. We don't want to keep doing that. I talk about. I mentioned legacy earlier at this other presentation that we did, and I'm in someone's legacy. I'm in my ancestors' legacy. I'm in my grandparents. I'm in my parents. I'm in their legacy. What legacy am I leaving behind? For them. What am I showing them? What they've done for me to help me get to where I'm at? Am I doing good by the legacy that they paid for me? So that's very important for me. I want to do right by everyone, and so I'm in a learning process, and I'm gonna keep learning, and I'm gonna keep trying to be here with all y'all and keep doing all of these things, and I hope we can continue to keep doing this together. That's the only way it's gonna continue to keep working.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you just speaking to the legacy part, and that reminds me of just a few minutes ago as Ramiro and I were driving here, he was like, so what is it that you most want to make sure to say tonight, which is such a good question, and it was helpful for me. And one of the things that I shared with him was that the first thing that came to mind was a quote from Ramiro's dad, from Luis Rodriguez, who said, rites of passage tie the threads of the past to the threads of the future. And for me, that has been such an important anchor for me, and really coming to understand rites of passage. And the way that I understand rites of passage, just to what is that, is as an intentional, meaningful marker of transition from one stage of life to another. So intentional, there's actually a level of consciousness about the process, and it's actually meaningful and significant both for the individual and for their community. And so rites of passage, they, all of our people, we all come from people that from so many generations ago, from the earliest vestiges of human culture, rites of passage were deeply woven in. And that's because they're necessary. They're an essential part of health. How do we honor and recognize the changes that we're going through in our lives for one another and see that and find our new seats? Because change is really hard and it's really awkward. And it's so much easier to just keep doing things the way that they've worked in the past, even if they no longer work. And so, we all come from people who knew how to really mark and honor those transitions. And none of our people gave those practices up willingly. They were actually, for many of our people, stolen because of how essential they were for health and healing and well-being. And it's I think for me, in these lands, the Indian boarding schools and the impact of that on so many of our communities. And those were an intentional effort to take kids out of where they were being raised in their traditional cultural practices and replace them instead with an incredibly oppressive system of imposing an external culture. And there's so many examples of that throughout history. And so for me, really coming to recognize that by reclaiming rites of passage and bringing them back into our community, that we're really taking a stand for yeah, for like a flourishing future of many cultures, coexisting with life, with the forces of life. Yeah, so I want to name that as just like the backdrop of learning for myself that history and coming to understand that in my own ancestry, and coming to recognize that, the efforts that were out there bringing rites of passage into the lives of young people, they're powerful and they're also not enough. There's too many young people that are slipping through the cracks. And so not that I think this book is going to make it into that many hands, but it was like what I felt like I could do was to create a guidebook that's specifically for young people, written to young people. There's not a lot, but there's a number of books out there by adults for other adults about rites of passage. And for me, it felt really important to speak directly to young people. I specifically kept my nephew in mind as I was writing this book, really sharing with him the story of the wisdom that I had received from elders that I've been blessed to have in my life. And then also, really realizing that as a, woman that by the time this book actually came out was in her mid-40s, like that my own story was important to tell, but that I actually needed the voices of young people also to create a more complete picture of rites of passage. So there's about 24 young people, ages like 16 to 30. So, that's my definition of young people at this point in my life. Also with their words and their stories about what it's like to be coming of age in their communities and in these times, from all sorts of different backgrounds, genders, races, cultures, classes, really trying to create as broad of a picture as I could. And the way the book is organized, Ramiro thought this would be useful to share, so I will, there's 3 sections of it. There's a getting started, and that's really a lot of the background that many of us should have, would have gotten, and many of us haven't gotten, just about like what's happening in different stages of life. And there's a whole chapter called Packing a Bag for the Journey. That's just what are the tools that we need. Learning to be by ourselves, the healing power of the arts, unlearning false cultural narratives as a backdrop, and then, also really exploring issues of cultural appropriation, and what is cultural appropriation, and what is cultural assimilation, and what is meaningful cultural exchange. And then a kind of deep dive into sex and drugs as formative rites of passage in many of our lives. And then the middle of the book is cultivating identity, purpose, and belonging. And so it's really exploring questions of who am I? Understanding that from all sorts of different perspectives. What are the different aspects that make up who we are, our bodies, our race, our class, our cultural identity, our souls? How do all of those pieces come together? And then who are my people and where do I come from? Understanding ancestry and lineage, and how do we relate to the good and the bad of our families, blood or chosen? And then the places, how are the places that we come from, how does that inform who we are? And then where am I going and how do I get there? And that begins to be like actually tools for, making the crossing into adulthood. And that's the final section of the book, is really about how to actually create a threshold experience, a rite of passage experience for oneself, which is a total paradox, right? Because we actually can't do it for ourselves. So it's like, how do I call the community around me to support me to make this transition? So that's the book in a little bit of a condensed version, and I'd love to read a little bit if folks are up for that. And this is from the chapter that I mentioned, Where Am I Going and How Do I Get There? It's a little bit of my own story. So, this is a quote from Isaac, age 28. I seem to be going in circles. I got the message as a kid that as one grew up, they were supposed to travel largely in a line. So I'm still making peace with the idea of circles. A few nights before the ceremony, I had a dream. 4 quart-sized canning jars, clean, well-polished, and full of blood, glistened down on me from a shelf above my head. I didn't know where the jars had come from. I didn't know what they were for, but I knew they were mine, and I felt okay with that. The weeks, maybe even months, leading up to the ceremony had been exhausting. I felt frayed around the edges, ready for rest and no responsibility. On the first day, I shared with my guides that all I wanted to do was dance beneath the moon. If I could just dance in the moonlight for the next 2 weeks, I declared, that would be perfect. I felt ready to lay down all of the old stories about who I was and what I believed, stories that felt like a bag of burdens dragging behind me and growing bigger every day. I longed to let them go and invite in guidance from the earth, the moon, the stars, and my ancestors. A few days later, I walked off into the mountains alone, ready to do just that. I carried my backpack, sleeping bag, 4 gallons of water, and a simple but still mysterious prayer, whittled down with the support of my guides for the journey. I tend the blood with dignity, at home with my place in the family of beings. On a little bench below 2 rocky peaks with a rolling saddle between them, I made home for 4 days. An old pinyon pine tree offered me shelter and companionship. Over 4 days, I told her many stories. I shared about all the ceremonies I had experienced in my life, my complete sexual history, my story of power, my story with money. I prayed that the stories would stay here and feed her roots or float away on the wind. I wanted to leave all of these stories in the mountains and come home clean, unencumbered. Each night, I slept beneath the stars, tossing and turning on a leaky camping mattress. The last full day, I awoke early and dressed in a traditional Vyshyvanka embroidered dress I had brought for this occasion. I put on a beaded Slavic necklace I had repaired the day before and made my way up to the top of a steep rocky peak. There, I invited in my healthy and whole ancestors, those who were ready to be part of the healing, and asked them to share their stories with me. I made prayers and offerings and shared with them my longings. I spoke of what I needed to let go of and what I was ready to call in. I found a little cave, and after asking permission, I crawled inside, seeking guidance and protection. I stayed up there for a long time in an altered state from days without food or other humans, taking in the cloud and birds, the rocks and trees, the feelings of my ancestors close by, and paying attention. After some time, I made my way back down to my pinyon pine home, ready to rest in preparation for a long final night. The next morning, I made vows of my commitments moving forward, gave thanks and water to the pinyon and other beings of this place, and made my way back to my companions and guides. I returned to my life lighter, clearer. I felt free of the stories about sex, money, power, who I was that had burdened me. I felt clearer about what was important to me and carried new images to anchor me to these insights. In the years since, I have carried this prayer, I tend the blood with dignity, at home with my place in the family of beings as my North Star. Tending the blood, my blood, women's blood, the blood shed by my ancestors and the blood of those harmed by my ancestors. With dignity, in my worth and worthiness as a human and as a woman, standing in my power. at home with my place in the family of beings, at home in my social locations, in my geographical place, in my family and relationships. And I know that sooner or later this story too will need to be released or renewed. When it does, I'll return to the land again to release prey and invite in what's next. Whether we want things to or not, just as soon as it seems like we reach a state of equilibrium, something begins to shift, whether in the outer world or in the interior world. Things that once worked for us no longer do. Have you ever watched a little kid acting like they're younger than they are? Things that they had done just weeks, months, or sometimes days earlier to make people laugh are suddenly no longer funny. Often they'll keep trying over and over, not sure what else to do. It's a remarkable thing to watch, painful because we've all experienced the confusion and frustration that comes from having outgrown your former self, but not yet knowing what will replace it. Luckily, there are time-tested tools that can help us navigate through these confusing liminal times with more grace and skill and less confusion and angst. They help us to figure out where we are at and where we are going, critical to make the passage from one life stage to another. But be warned, learning these tools doesn't necessarily make our lives easier or happier. Change is often difficult, especially so in a culture that has taught us that control and certainty are both possible and desirable. What these tools do provide are ways to find and make meaning when the ground is shifting under our feet. They help to increase our courage and resiliency in the face of crisis. The more practice we get applying tools to navigate life's transitions, the more skilled we get using them. The more skilled we get using these tools, the more confidence we gain that they truly work, and the more confidence we gain in our own deeper wisdom and knowing. With this comes deeper self-love and self-acceptance, which in turn allows for bigger and bigger risk-taking. We can put ourselves in unknown territory and accept high levels of vulnerability because we can trust our capacity to ultimately soothe and care for ourselves and know we will be all right. With ever deeper levels of vulnerability, we allow ourselves to be transformed through our encounters with others. We find that the identities that we once so tightly clung to are no longer necessary, and we can, in fact, survive without them. Our belonging no longer depends on these once so essential roles. So I'll stop there for tonight, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, listening to what you were reading, so I guess that one thing that really brought to mind was the thing about tools. Mm-hmm. So every tribe and every culture, every tradition has their way and how they look at rites of passage, right? I know what Picos was talking about earlier about me as a Mexica person. We are, we do things in 13s, every 13 year, right? It's a different ceremony for our young people, but even as we get older, we have naming ceremonies, our traditions. Those are rites of passage for us as young people, but also as adults. When we're 52, that's supposed to be our elder year, And so every tribe, they do it differently. They have their own tools. These are our tools for us as Mexica people, but we also share. It's a knowledge that can be shared, and I think that's what the importance of the book, because these are experiences of elders, of people that you connected with through all the years of your own life that helped guide you. It's not just one person or one tribe or one culture. And when young people read the book and they can see it, I think they can relate to it, because those experiences is their experiences, no matter the age. The authors, good authors, I'm going to be a little biased in bringing up my dad, Luis Rodriguez. He, after 40 years of writing, he's still able to relate to young people. They can still relate with him, which is good, but it's also kind of unfortunate, because then that kind of shows that those things that he was going through 40 years ago, they're still happening. And probably worse now, and at an alarming rate. Our young people, we've been talking about it, are dying and hurting. And so it's important that we keep acknowledging that so we can do something to help stop that, So then the next 40 years from now, hopefully things will be better and we can make those changes. We don't want to have to keep going through all of this with ourselves and our young people, So that's why I'm here. I'm glad to be here, So I appreciate your journey. I appreciate what you were reading, just how the feelings, the sentiments, the things that your emotions that you're going through as you went through your own journey is what I know when we talk to these young people, they're going through it too. Experiences are different. Generations, of course, different time, different years, but it's harder now, I think, for them. They're kind of lost into their own cell phones and and social medias. And, one of the things I was talking to my parents about earlier was that, we don't have a memory anymore. We used to remember addresses and phone numbers and or things that we could read, like we would read and we could memorize it. We don't do all that because it's all on our phones, our computers, or whatever it is. Yes. Exactly. It's so we've lost that capacity, and those are things that we have to bring back. But that's why bookstores are still important, because now, you have Kindles and other things that people could read, and, but books are so relevant. It empowers and makes our minds more, explosive. We need that explosion in our brains. So thank you, and again, yeah.
Yeah, and I would love it if you would be willing to read a poem or
Okay.
two.
All right, here we go. So, I want to read one I read a bunch of times. Do we have people are people online? Are they listening? Yeah? Cool. Cool.
Nice.
Cool. Man, thank you. So you're by yourselves. I know we have a small crowd, but you are many to us. We appreciate you all. You are many. All y'all are many to us. So this poem I'm going to read comes from a little chapbook that I have called Coming Home. My good friend Eduardo Rocha from Chicago wanted me to put a book out on poems. And this book came about as soon as I got out of prison, like just 2 months out. I ended up with the young woman, and I was with her for 2 years, and it was not really a good relationship. But you gotta understand too, like I had 3 kids, 3 different baby mamas. I was a young person. I had my son when I was 17, my daughter 18, my other daughter 19. I did not know nothing about relationships, nothing about love, none of that. So I come home, get into a relationship, trying to help her raise her 2 boys, and it ended up being so bad. And so, of all the things that I've been through in my life, getting shot at, beaten up by the police, heartbreak was the worst thing I ever felt. And I was 37 feeling heartbreak ever in my life for the first time. It's like I told you, my rites of passage come in bundles of years. That's a rites of passage, getting your heart broken, right? So for a young person, so it happened at a later age. So, but guess what? I was able to write a chapbook with all these heartbroken poems. But the first poem is not a heartbreaking poem. It's a poem about, this first poem is the power of poetry. When I was always writing poetry when I was in the hood, I always had a notepad where I was doing drugs, holding security, whatever I was doing, I always had a notepad. And, the poetry was a savior for me too. I mean, I still did the things that I was doing, but at the same time, things probably could have been worse. So my homie of mine told me about an experience that he had went through with me. I guess we had got locked up and we were in the bullpen with a bunch of our enemies. But like I said, I was probably high and drunk, and I had a little notepad, and I didn't pay attention to who was in there, and I'm writing poetry, and they're like, dude, like, we're about to get into a fight. We're about to get into some battles with them. And, you know, I instead of dealing with that, I ended up reading a poem, and he said that when I read it, they just stopped, bowed their heads, and then they all sat back down. Like, they were amazed, instead of fighting with us, that this poem came out. I don't remember the experience. I don't even remember the poem. He memorized the poem. So my friend Eduardo told me, well, why don't I write a poem about his version of what he saw when I wrote that poem? So I'm gonna read the poem. Okay, it's untitled. Okay, and here it goes. We hold on to our afflicted lives like a badge of honor. Hermanos por vida. Young, naive, full of hope, day in, day out, on the block, away from the block, claiming the block. Then we get caught up on the block, entering a new stage, a new world, a new beginning. The smells is what hit us first. The despair on these lonely faces. All around are mirrors, reflections of ourselves. We entered this cage with pride and strength, and those reflections become demons, anger spewing out of their pores, surrounding us with hate, a hate born from struggle and strife. I sit on the bench, my mind enmeshed into my poem of insanity. The words become worlds, the syllables become planets, the letters become my universe, nothing else exists. Mexico, Mexico, get up, pay attention, look around you. So real quick, my nickname in my neighborhood was Mexico. Because just know I joined the Puerto Rican gang, and I had to let them know that I wasn't Puerto Rican, I am Mexican. But I grew up Puerto Rican. Okay. I don't listen, can't stop, addicted to my sorrow, expressed through these verses that have shined the light on the souls of every man in that cage. Every scar, every wrinkle, every indentation has a story. We are a walking library of battle and fatigue. The men stand up, the tension rises, they come closer. Mi hermanos are ready, fists clenched. This is nothing new. For months we have been battling every gang on every block. Numbers dwindled down to just a few with hearts of steel. I finish. Listen to what I wrote. Quetzalcoatl enters my body and the words become the wind, a self-reflection of a boy fighting to become a man. We have created our own self-loathing. The words reverberate through every spirit. Quetzalcoatl resurrects our hearts. The blackness disappears. For one brief moment, we are shining stars, gods. Pain becomes self-love, and the men withdraw. My poem becomes a shield against who we don't want to be. My poem becomes a blanket that comforts the boy, and in his dreams, a man emerges. For one brief moment, we all are Quetzalcoatl. Right. So this other one I'm going to read. So I am a danzante, and it's an honor to be dancing with Danza Azteca Xochipilli from East LA. Been dancing with them for the last couple of years, but I've been dancing for like 8 years. So this is a poem that's related to that, but like I said, it's also a poem from my own experiences, and everything that I do now, whether tradition or ceremony, it comes from my experiences and what I've gone through in my life. And again, well, as the theme is, rites of passage, I guess I'll keep emphasizing that that's how things have been for me. When my introduction for me to rites of passage came through initiations from the neighborhood, getting violations, getting getting chased down, getting by the police. Those are stages of our lives. As a young person, when you go to jail, that's an honor, unfortunately. And those are, the things that we did. We didn't understand that it's an ancestral code that was there from thousands of years. We don't know that. We're creating things that already were created, but we're just, distorting it. And it's unfortunate a lot of people get hurt because of that. When we don't do things correctly, we lose ourselves, and we lose our community, and the pain just keeps going. So this is why we do, this is why we're sitting here, this is why we're doing the things we're doing. So we have good teachers like Picos and other people, that are helping us try to make sure we do things correctly. We have to show them that correctness doesn't mean that it's the, you had mentioned a little bit about that, like it's the main powerful thing. We're going to make mistakes along the way, and it's okay, but as long as we keep going forward, right? So this one's called Dancing Through a Beating. I spin, I squat, move back, move forward, take a deep breath, and do it again. I spin, I squat, move back, move forward, take a deep breath, consumed by energies from the Creator, drenched in sweat, the beat of the wewet, the rattle of the sonaja, my body pushed beyond its limits, my mind focused, and with each movement, every step, I send prayers to the Creator, my ancestors, asking for guidance, for wisdom, for healing, for me, for my family, for my community. I spin, I squat, move back, move forward, take a deep breath. The police handcuff me, spin me around, make me squat on the floor. They move me back, they move me forward, and I take a deep breath with every punch that lands on my face. Consumed by their hate, I am drenched in my own blood. My heart beats fast, my bones rattle hard, and my body has gone way beyond its limits. Their minds are focused with each punch, every kick. There are no prayers for guidance, for wisdom, for healing. I am only left with pain, shame, humiliation. I spin, I squat, move back, move forward, take a deep breath. Who I was then, who I am now, who I will be, is all marked by the preciseness of my ability to follow the grandfathers into that next realm. And on that journey, the beat of the wewet, my heart, the rattle of the sanaha, my bones, will keep me from falling off the path of the Mexicayot. I dance through the beatings of my life. I dance through the beatings of my inner demons. I dance through the beatings of my father's abandonment, the choices I have made in life, the degradation of the police. I dance through the beatings of my own transitions to becoming a strong and respected Mexica warrior, a warrior for peace, a warrior for love, a warrior to open doors for our young people going forward into the next 7 generations, giving them guidance, wisdom, healing as they make their own transitions on the path of the Mexicayot. So for them, for me, for my kids, for my family, for my community, my ancestors, Tonantzin, Omateo, I spin, I squat, move back, move forward, take a deep breath, and do it again, and again, and again, and again. Maybe one more?
Great.
Yeah? All right. So this other one is just my experiences. I'm going to tell you, growing up in Chicago, we don't have mountains. But we do have a lot of forests. We have forest preserves, we have hills, But I love living here. We have the mountains right here. And when you travel up north, you travel and you see a lot of the wilderness, the mountains. But when I wrote this poem, it started me thinking about, the hurt that we're causing to our environment too, what we have done to Tonantzin, our Mother Earth, and how we've treated her, So this is a poem that made me think about that. And so I call it Forgiveness from Tonantzin. Traveling through the lands of my ancestors, embracing their history, acknowledging their struggles, humbled by their teachings, I am minuscule in comparison to the energy of my grandmother, Tonantzin. The trees give me life, the wind gives me focus. In each direction I follow, my spirit is unmovable, constant, steady, strong. Tonantzin holds me in her arms, chained to her heart. I fall to my knees and I ask her for forgiveness. My tears become a river. My pain becomes an ocean. I am lost in the insanity. The madness has transformed me, evolved me, mutated me into this man of suffering. I look up into the sky and scream, forgive me, Tonantzin. Forgive me, my grandmother. Forgive me for what I have done, for what I do now, for what I will do tomorrow. I stand up. Her energy travels through my bones. My soul becomes balanced, and I continue traveling through the lands of my ancestors, embracing their history, acknowledging their struggle, humbled by their teachings. I am minuscule in comparison to the energy of my grandmother, Tonantzin, the energy of my grandfather, with Tonatiuh, the energy of Ometeo. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect choices for tonight. And we'd love to just open up the space for a few minutes if there's any questions or comments here in person and also on the live stream. And if not, that's fine too, but just wanted to make a little space for that.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Of course you asked that question. You want to share that story?
Well, I mean, I want to, but the person that I had the conflict was not here, so I just want to respect. I mean, I could talk, generalize it a little bit, but me and her are really good right now. I love her; she's great. But I guess what it was is that, and I don't know, maybe because you know her more than I do, why it happened, but just to know, like, look, this is who I am. This is how I am. I mean, I don't know if I look like a homeless person. I don't know if I look like a thug still. I mean, and I guess this person was still looking at me in that sense. And all I was trying to do was get some food. I had just met these people. I didn't even know who they were. And all I was trying to do was get some food, and they didn't feel like I belonged there. And I was, and I've had to deal with that, all my life. And then plus coming out of prison, and I was 2016, so I was only out of prison for 6 years. And so you can imagine how angry. And at that time, I was really more angry than I am. I mean, I still have a lot of rage still inside me, but at least I'm a little bit more balanced than I was at that time. So to had to deal with me in that sense, they just were questioning, like, why am I at this event? What am I doing here? Without even knowing who I am. I don't even know you. And I thought I belonged. I thought it was a welcoming place for me, but I guess for me it didn't feel like it wasn't. And so, yeah, it really pissed me off. So I had to walk away. But then the person kept following me, and then I wish it was here, because I kind of felt bad talking about it, because it's like, cause I really love her. We made amends. One thing it's good to know about forgiveness. I've had to forgive. But she follows me, and then once she sees who my dad is, then oh my God, then that's like, oh, well, now you want to acknowledge me. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, man. It's like, yeah, it was not a good situation, and I unfortunately, like I said, I'm not always the easiest person to get along with, and that person to me represented what youth passageways was about. So I didn't really want to really associate much with them because I felt like, well, is this how they're treating their youth? Is this what they do with the young people? You know, a lot of judgment, you know, and then you make them feel bad and it's just shame, humiliation. Like, come on, this is not how you're supposed to work with young people. But I've had to let go of that within myself and not be so judgmental and try to, you know, one thing I learned about is perspective. Everybody has their own perspectives, and that's where the battles fight. That's where the fight comes from because everyone's continually looking at ways in different, and, you know, looking at things in different ways, and we're all not understanding, and there's no communication, and so there really was no communication, and so at that time, so it took a process of communicating with each other and understanding and trying to get where they're at. You know, for me to like not be so angry and forgiving and understanding her place, where she was at her own life in her own time. Like, it's a lot. We don't do that. That was a good conflict because there's a lot of conflicts that we have in the streets. There's a lot of conflict that we have with each other. There's a lot of conflicts, you know, and that we engage in, and we never try to, you know, understand each other from those conflicts. We just want to be right. We just want to be righteous with our anger and justified with how we're feeling, you know? Because I felt like I was righteous and justified in how I was feeling. Maybe I was, but whatever was happening, I wasn't seeing it until later, you know? Which I'm glad, because I love them all.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's so good to hear that. And, you know, I think at that event, it was like a smaller gathering that was opening up into a large group of people. And so it was also, you showed up right at this moment where, like the stress of like, oh, do we have enough food to feed our people, you know? And that thing that can sometimes happen of constriction as opposed to expansion, you know, and then who is impacted when the constriction happens? And then how do all of our different wounds of belonging and like fear of anger, how do those show up in the space? And so, and I think for me that's been one of the beautiful things about the Youth Passageways Network is there have been a lot of moments of big conflict, and what is it to stay with it? And I'll just name Kruti Parekh, you know, who's also in Los Angeles, really deeply involved with Youth Justice Coalition as a major teacher in our network of transformative justice, and the importance of like, yeah, like you were saying, forgiveness and staying with it, making repair and amends. So yeah, thanks for asking. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I would say that's like the sweet spot, but I also like really want to acknowledge what Ramiro said about like rites of passage go on in the rest of our lives, and we all, I would argue that all of us who have made it past that stage still have cleanup work to do as well. So the book is really relevant for older audiences too. Yep. So what I talk about in this book, for me, it's, how do I say? So I grew up in the just say no era. That was like, like I distinctly remember, and I imagine that others here do too, the like fried egg, this is your brain on drugs. And like how much that, for me, did not instill trust in adults because it was like part of a much bigger picture. And so what I really talk about in this book is what it is to reclaim the sacred in relation to love and sexuality and substances. And really through sharing stories of young people in particular that were generous enough to share their stories with me and have them be written in this book. What is it, like, how do we really explore safety and consent and connection and pleasure in ways that are healthy for us? And really, what are there's a lot of damage, it's like good judgment comes from experience. And so what do you do when you don't have experience, right? Because you're still going to make choices, and they're not always great choices. So this book really attempts to offer some framework and some guidance on well, how do I evaluate safety? What is risk management lens? Pleasure is actually a really important thing, and what is it to create and explore pleasure in my life? How can I do that? Not with just this just say no, abstinence only framework, but in ways that really are not going to set me up for death or enormous pain and suffering, and dealing with the consequences of that. And then I also talk about, sobriety as a really important path of initiation, yes, to substances. And I would also say that for many of us, getting sober was a profound rite of passage in our lives. So what is that about also as well?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing we have to address is the root. Why are young people going in that direction? Why are they vaping? Why are they taking fentanyl? Why are, it's not just trying to stop them from doing it, but trying to get them, where they're at in their lives to not even want to have to get to do that, and that's the thing right now, This is what I was talking about, how lost our generations going through right now, because there's so many Band-Aid remedies, and no one's addressing those problems, For me, my sobriety, I've been sober for 20 years, since 1998, so that's what, 25 years, I think? Something like that, man, that's...
A long time ago.
And I had to do it when I was in prison. But I'm just going to tell you, that's been the best thing in my life, because this doesn't mean that my life's perfect. Oh, no, like I said, I just went through 2 years of Harper. You would think that after that, I would want to go in a bar and go get drunk, but I didn't. My sobriety is my livelihood. It's my savior, man. It's been, I can go through my life. I can go through all those hardships and all those things that I went through, and I can be focused. I'm not living in that cloud, and I would love to see how we can get young people to be in that kind of way also, to stay focused, to stay balanced, Those substances it's poison, but they've been doing this for hundreds of years, since the beginning of the colonization. They've been trying to poison us with all of these things, This is how they've been damaging our communities, by bringing all of these things in, And we have to think about it in that context, these poisons continue to keep existing, and that's why we're here. We're trying to figure out how we can stop those poisons, the poisoning of our community. How can we stop that from happening? I know it's hard for young people to understand it. Some places in this country and even in the reservations, they get hit hard. No one's helping them address that, and it's not just the fault of the community. It's just the resources are not there. We're struggling all the time to have resources and share with each other, and that's where the fights are happening, and we have to try to be better with each other. So hopefully our young people can understand that, like you said, those pleasures, they're there, but our indigenous people knew how to handle those pleasures in a balanced way. You know, and you know, one thing we were talking about was about how, for us as indigenous peoples and our ancestors, rites of passage and traditions, some were all normal. We didn't have that language like that. We, you know, now we're talking about rites of passage and ceremony traditions, and we're struggling to get to those, to do those things. But our ancestors, it was a part of their lives. It was a normal way of living. Ceremony and all of that was just how they woke up. They prayed or do whatever they needed to in ceremony traditions. We're trying to create those things. We're trying to fight for those things that were normalized in our lives. And the way you had said it, the I forgot what you had said. The denormal, the way that they took it from us. I forgot. But yes. So I hope that answers.
Yep. Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, the other thing that I hear you really speaking to, and this is something that I really love about changes in youth culture today versus like nobody was talking about consent when I was growing up. And I feel like for so many young people, like like what is an enthusiastic yes is like something that young people learn nowadays, that like, you know, enthusiastic yes is the only yes that's acceptable. Nobody ever taught me that. Well, nobody taught me that until far too few years ago. So, yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
So you're saying that it's never too late to have rites of passage, regardless of, you know, maybe in the late your 60s or 70s. I could relate to you. You know, my rites of passage was the same. They jumped into the neighborhood and accepted. I remember it was like yesterday, the same feeling I had when I was turning from a young man to an adult. An adult. And my body was changing. We had men, uncles, brothers, older men in our family, but they weren't really around. They were there, but not really there. And so there was no one to teach me what was right growing up as a man. You know, maybe some things, yes, but still growing up and changing, my body changing, you know, my voice changing, and starting to get a little mustache, and pimples all over my head, and stretching, and what's happening with me? You know, I wish somebody would have explained, you know, you're growing, you're changing from a child to a man. And I didn't like the way I felt. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like my surroundings. So addictions were a lifesaver for me. It changed the way I looked, how I felt, how I thought. You know, changed my environment. There was no one to tell me this is what's going on. It put me on the wrong path.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of wrong information today from society and teachings, you know, what we learn here on TV and all that. Young kids are getting the wrong message. You know, so I think it is important to have these, get our youth, as many as we can in our families to begin with, to teach ceremony and curious about having another rites of passage at night.
Yep.
Having them, I'm surrounded by spiritual people, people that do ceremony. As a matter of fact, a young friend of mine called me and said he just came from the retreat. On that weekend, right?
Yeah.
50 young men, high school students, college students, doing ceremony, learning how to respect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Change is happening, We're just a part of it here. There's parts all over the country.
Yeah, and a couple of things that I take from what you shared, for me, one is, what is it not just to kind of like focus on rites of passage for young people, but to create spaces for like intergenerational spaces where folks in different life stages are really being honored and having the opportunity to move into the stage that they're in now. And like in my community in Washington, there's this group of older women who approached me who were really like exploring what does it mean to be moving into a later stage of life, and really asking me for some support around that passage that they were going through. And first of all, it was such an honor to support them, to get down and wash these old women's feet, that had walked so many miles in their life. And now to really be able to call on them, they call themselves the Wise Hearts, and it's this group of 6 women. And it is such a gift for me to have these women in my life that I can call on, and that others in my age group and the youngers that we can call on as a support. And I see, Ramiro, how you're we need our elders, right? And what it is for elders to really show up. It's huge.
Yeah, I was like you because I didn't. My dad abandoned me, my sister. I had no mentors growing up. Mentors was the streets. And the one key thing you said though, that's how we had to survive. I can never look back and try to take that away because I would not be here if it wasn't for my homies helping protect me, the neighborhood protecting me. Man, I don't know. I was going through changes of my life as an adolescent, and I never knew what it meant. They were the ones that guided me. Of course, it was on a different path. But man, I would, it just made me who I am today. And so I have to always acknowledge that, but I also have to acknowledge that, it took later year teachers like yourself and my dad and other elders and to help me realize that I am more than just that little box that I was put in, because that was an oppressive box. That was the blueprint that was meant for me as I was born, that this colonization wanted for me. That was the purpose of that. They want our young people to be suffered. They want our people to take all those poisons. They want our people to die, or to be soldiers or to be in their factories. That's how they always wanted us. And it was the indigenous ways that taught me that I can get a way out of that box. That emptiness, it doesn't have to be empty anymore.
I talk about, I always share with certain people about feathers and fluff. And that's the skin, the bark, my feathers. Throughout growing up as a child, I going to elementary school. And they told me I couldn't speak Spanish. And my mom used to tell me I used to speak Spanish fluently. I would speak Spanish in school, and they told me I would always be under the teacher's desk. I remember one time she told me, go squat down in the corner. I didn't know what squat meant. She forced me to the corner, pushed me down. And they used to tell me, don't bring them burritos to school. It's like it was like yesterday, right? I couldn't understand. I couldn't tell my mother, but I would tell her they wanted me to bring sandwiches, square sandwiches.
Yeah.
Bologna, whatever. Don't bring them burritos to school. I was taking my feathers away. Being pulled over by the police and taken to the substation What? No. I feel hot. We get our credit stuff.
Yeah, and how do we keep our young people from losing their feathers? Yeah.
Well, I think to me, I think it's this, I'm new here to be able to tell you, but I think to myself, like, I feel, like, I have no identity, like, at all, like, media kind of thing. I don't ever remember being told don't speak Spanish when I was just little, and I remember that, because my mom spoke Spanish, my grandmother, and that was my first language. But now that I have my grandkids, it's like how we and I'm like just beginning. I'm just really starting to try to figure out who I am so I can teach them who they are. Because being born to immigrant parents, but my mother was very Americanized because they're from Baja California. So a lot of tourism, so it's my mom, I don't remember my mom making tortillas and stuff, so I'm okay, so where did I come from? Am I Mexican? So you start thinking, yeah, I am Mexican. But you start thinking, and I think that's what I come to learn, to start learning. And I did sign up, for the gatherings. I haven't went to them yet, but I did their newsletter about, and I'm going to go, I want to start going. Because I think it's important that I can learn, like, where did I come from? I think that's why I came today, because I'm like, okay, my life is talking to me. It's just like learning, like, I mean, at my age to have to learn, you're kind of embarrassed to ask questions. I am embarrassed, like, so what's this, and so what's that? And, you kind of like stay quiet because you don't want to feel like you don't know anything, even if you don't know anything. You still want people to know you don't know anything, but when you don't know anything, you kind of like, and that just kind of figure things out, like just listen to little things that you want to ask. Sometimes you have like 101 questions, but I think that's the problem. Is trying to figure things out and look at the delivery process, because that's the responsibilities of life, so.
And I'll just say, I mean, your experience, it's so common, right? Like I remember, I went to Ukraine, which is like where my great grandparents are from, and it's like that, like pretty much from the moment they arrived on these shores, it was like they were not going to practice their old ways. We're American now, like none of that culture existed. By the time my mom grew up, for sure, she didn't have any of it. So for me, going back to Ukraine was such a so exciting to see and experience this culture that my people had left behind. And one of the things that was amazing to me was to realize that even for so many of the Ukrainians there, that they felt no sense of cultural, they felt the loss of, not no sense, but the loss of the culture that had been, under the forces of Soviet rule, kept away from them. And just really realizing, oh, these forces of empire, they're all across the planet, and so many of our people, haven't, oh, who am I? Where do I come from, and what is mine authentically? And so just to, really thank you for speaking that.
My grandfather, we were immigrated here because he was in the war. He was in the army, and so my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, so I was born in San Diego, right over the border, and they joke around a lot, like, you're very naked girl, but sometimes, but you don't know, my grandfather was a fisherman.
Yeah.
He worked in the ports of San Diego, and then he moved to the ports of Waimea, from San Diego to Oxnard, then we still used LA. But there's never this talk about anything. My grandfather spoke English and Spanish. rare when I get to come to Honduras, I was born in South America. But at the same time, like that's why I stood around these places. I want to know, how I can help them. And help myself, I guess, too.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little lost,
Mhm.
you know.
And that's what my friend Tina, I'm recording my audiobook right now, and so I'll read aloud, and she's listening, and she talks about, she's older, but for her, she's like, this book speaks to that, young part of me that, like, oh, I wish that my mom had taught me these things as a youth, Yeah.
I seen a documentary a while back, some rabbis and Jewish people.
Mhm.
They were talking about success in life, as a people, as a culture, as a family, as a community. The reason why we're successful people is because we've always taught our children at a young age, and we taught them about our songs, our ceremonies, our prayers, our food, our language, all about our culture, so that they build a foundation and they have a sense of purpose, sense of they know where they're going, wherever that is. They have direction. We don't get that direction. But I see it's happening here in Tia Chucha,
Yeah.
and other organized, other groups that we know are doing that, teaching us these things, the foods, prayers and ceremonies. This is what our ancestors. You don't have to do it exactly how they did it. You know, you know for sure. You have an idea. This is how they did it. This is what they did at the ceremony. You get to know, okay, this is who I am. I like who I am. These things.
I noticed with my grandkids, like, well, Divine was in danza with Monique, and all of them this year she's like, I don't do it. And I'm like, what do you mean? I think I was more broken-hearted than anything to know, like, 'cause I'm trying to, learn and be there. But it's kind of hard, like I said, once you get embarrassing to be asking so many questions, like, or when, on Facebook, this is, the day of whatever, I'm not like, what does that mean? I have no sense of anything, so what does that mean? Like, I guess it would mean kind of like this is, for example, I don't know if that's going to be, but you want more meaning, more, something like, like I feel like a little kid, that something literally has to explain things to me, say, hey, Lorena, this is what it is, in order for me to explain it to them. So being here and having, offers like you coming in and sharing me something, it does mean anything. Because I'm learning.
Yeah, and I think we probably want to wind up here for the night, but just
Thank
to,
you all.
what's that?
No, thank you all. Thank
But
you.
just to, like, maybe just end with just to say, I can totally relate, it's like so much, it's like these ways are our birthright, and yet for many of us, like, no access, like things I should have learned as a small child, and it is embarrassing. It's so embarrassing to not have that. And, what is it for me to really think multi-generationally, you with your grandkids, and what about their grandkids, what's it?
For my kids,
Yeah.
my kids, like I think I'm going to something. I don't know, I'm trying to get them to come and do something I just bought for to take anything. Because he listens to sleep. There's no passion, he doesn't know, where he comes from. Because I know his dad's family is from New Mexico, from Albuquerque, so they were from little tribes. But that wasn't recognized, but he's still from somewhere, so that does matter, all that matters.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I hate that it was an outer. I love being an outer. I just love it. But it puts me in a box with Mrs. Outer, which means that I don't have the mind of a child's cute.
Mm.
That I don't get to learn something. This young woman here, when she asked the question, I could relate to that. I understood that. And I love that she asked that question. And I love your answer to her. That why would you want to do something? And so, you're a child. You're not that elder. You are elder. You deserve to be respected. But don't put you in that definition of an elder. I learned so much. I loved your grandchildren playing
Mhm.
cutout. You know, I remember my grandson. Safe places, Tia Chucha, and Lisa Lay, the other, and so on. Safe places where you don't have to feel stupid for asking questions. You know, we would take my grandson all over because he was a veteran. And it was just the most, I learned, Melissa taught me about music, and there was another young woman, Norma, I don't know if you know her. These young women taught so much. And they did not make me feel stupid. I learned the whole direction. I learned so many ceremonies. And I'm grateful for the young people that taught me. And I'm grateful for the elders that taught me. Grateful for these children that have taught me things. So when we put a label on ourselves, that means that we're stupid, that we're old, that we have a preconceived instead of saying that we're revolutionary. We're revolutionary. It doesn't mean that we're going to overcome the government and Washington. I'm not saying that. That means that we as women,
No. Thank you. Oh, Mateo.
Anything more you want to say?
No, just thank you all. You know, how we do this together, trying to save our children's lives, trying to save our lives. You know, and just thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all very much for coming.
Oh, Mateo.
Yeah, thank you.